The contemptuous laughter sliced through the humid night air like a serrated blade. "Would you look at that neon disaster?" Master Chief Garrett Thorne's voice thundered across the training yard of Naval Special Warfare Command, his 6'4" frame planted like a concrete pillar beneath the single functioning security light. Arms thick as bridge cables crossed over a chest that could stop small caliber rounds, his granite-hewn jaw set in an expression of theatrical disgust. "Darkness is our weapon, blue hair girl, and looking at you..." He let his gaze crawl over the woman standing before him with deliberate slowness. "A streetlight glows brighter than whatever you're supposed to be." 27 personnel erupted in laughter. The sound bounced off concrete walls and metal structures, amplifying into something ugly, something tribal. Phone screens flickered to life throughout the crowd, camera lenses catching the harsh yellow glare as they focused on the spectacle unfolding in the yard. Saren Whitmore stood motionless at the center of the gathering storm. Her electric blue hair caught that solitary security light like a beacon against the encroaching darkness, impossibly vivid against the muted grays and blacks of the military installation. Porcelain skin without a single smudge, despite 8 hours of crawling through maintenance tunnels and electrical junction boxes. High cheekbones that cast subtle shadows across features arranged in perfect neutrality. Athletic frame, toned but not bulky. The kind of physique that suggested capability without advertising it. And those eyes. Steady, unblinking, holding absolutely nothing that Garrett could read. He closed the distance between them in 3 aggressive strides, combat boots striking concrete with the authority of 20 years in special operations. His hand shot out, grabbing a fistful of her gray work shirt, yanking upward until only her toes maintained contact with the ground. 6 of my men vanished into that darkness tonight. His breath came hot against her face, carrying coffee and barely restrained violence. 6, and you, he shook her once, hard. The only civilian with complete access to every electrical schematic on this entire installation just happened to be in the primary junction room when the whole eastern grid collapsed. She said nothing. Her breathing remained absolutely steady. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. A pattern that Garrett, in his fury, failed to recognize as combat stress management technique. "You think I don't see what you are?" He pulled her closer, close enough that she could count the broken capillaries in his eyes. "You think that ridiculous hair and those innocent looks fool anyone? You're a spy, a saboteur, and when I find out who sent you..." "Master Chief," a voice cut through the tirade. Lieutenant Commander Bishop Hale materialized from the shadows near the administrative building, his thin frame immaculate in pressed utilities, his smile carrying all the warmth of a scalpel. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more appropriate." Garrett's jaw tightened. "She's responsible for..." "Possibly." Bishop's smile never wavered. "Probably. But establishing culpability requires methodology that public spectacle cannot provide." His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over Saren with something that flickered too quickly to identify. Recognition? Anticipation? "Let me handle the interrogation. This falls within my operational purview." For a long moment, the 2 men faced each other across an invisible line of authority. Then Garrett released his grip, letting Saren drop. She landed on her feet without stumbling, weight distributed evenly, posture already recovering to that strange stillness that made her seem less like a frightened civilian and more like something waiting. "Throw her in holding," Garrett's voice carried across the yard, playing to the phones, to the crowd, to his own wounded pride. "When we find my people, and we will find them, she's going to answer for every minute they spent in danger." 2 military police officers stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked around Saren's wrists with practiced efficiency, and she offered her hands at exactly the right angle without being instructed. Another detail lost in the chaos. Another breadcrumb that no one thought to follow. Master Chief Silas Drummond watched from the edge of the crowd, his weathered face creased with 55 years of living and 35 years of service. Something nagged at him, an itch between his shoulder blades that had saved his life more times than he could count. The woman moved wrong. Not clumsy wrong, not scared wrong, but trained wrong. Her steps matched the MP escort's pace without visual reference, maintaining tactical spacing instinctively. "Who the hell are you really?" he murmured to himself. The procession crossed the main courtyard, passing beneath the massive American flag that hung limp in the dead air. Photographs of decorated officers lined the walls. Memorial plaques caught the emergency lighting. Challenge coins gleamed in display cases. All the trappings of honor and service, framing a parade of humiliation that Garrett orchestrated with vindictive precision. "You know what happens to spies on military installations?" Garrett announced to his audience, voice carrying theatrical concern. "They disappear, into systems that don't officially exist, into interrogation rooms that have never been photographed, into graves that never get marked." Petty Officer Wren Calloway, 24 years old and 3 months into her first assignment, kept her phone trained on the scene while something uncomfortable twisted in her gut. The prisoner wasn't reacting, at all. No tears, no protests, no desperate explanations, just that eerie stillness that felt less like defeat and more like patience. "She's not scared," Wren whispered to Ensign Darcy Tatum beside her. "Look at her face. She's not even a little bit scared." Darcy shrugged. "Maybe she's in shock." Maybe. But Wren kept recording anyway, some instinct telling her this footage would matter later. What she's about to reveal will make every single person in that courtyard regret everything. Hit subscribe now because you won't believe what happens in the next 3 minutes. The interrogation room occupied the basement level of the administrative building, accessible only through a series of security checkpoints that required increasingly elevated clearances. Concrete walls, metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs positioned for maximum psychological pressure, one-way mirror covering the entire east wall, behind which observers could watch without being seen. Seren sat without being directed, positioning herself to face both the door and the observation window simultaneously. Her hands rested on the table, fingers interlaced, completely relaxed despite the restraints. She might have been waiting for a bus rather than facing accusations of espionage and potential treason. Bishop Hale settled into the chair across from her, placing a manila folder on the table with deliberate slowness. "Let's dispense with theater, shall we?" His voice carried cultured smoothness, each syllable precisely calibrated. "You know why you're here. I have certain suspicions about who you really are. The only question is how much unpleasantness we need to endure before reaching the inevitable conclusion." Serene's expression remained neutral. 4 seconds of silence stretched into 8, then 12. She didn't blink. Behind the one-way mirror, Chief Warrant Officer Knox Everhart leaned forward in his chair. 40 years old, 22 years of interrogation experience across 3 continents, and he had never seen anyone maintain that level of controlled stillness without significant training. Most civilians cracked within minutes, nervous tics, fidgeting, defensive posturing. This woman showed none of it. "She's counting," he murmured to Captain Cordelia Vance, who stood beside him with arms crossed. "Watch her breathing, 4-count box pattern. That's advanced stress management technique, the kind we teach to operators going into high-risk environments." Vance frowned. "Civilian contractors don't learn combat breathing." "No, they don't." In the interrogation room, Bishop opened his folder with a theatrical flourish. "You arrived at this installation 14 months ago. Electrical contractor, civilian status, clearance limited to maintenance areas." He extracted a photograph, sliding it across the table. "Yet somehow you've managed to access 17 restricted zones during your tenure here. Zones that require security clearances you don't possess." Seren glanced at the photograph, said nothing. "You were present during 3 separate communication blackouts over the past 6 months. Each one coincided with sensitive operations that subsequently experienced complications." Another photograph. "And tonight, when our entire eastern grid collapsed and 6 Navy SEALs vanished into the training wilderness, you were found in the primary junction room." The silence stretched like a rubber band approaching its breaking point. Bishop leaned back, studying her with renewed interest. Most people, confronted with evidence of this magnitude, would offer explanations, alibis, desperate protestations of innocence. His head tilted slightly, predatory curiosity sharpening his features. "Your silence is fascinating. Either you're guilty beyond any reasonable defense, or you're waiting for something specific to happen." His smile widened a fraction. Something cold moved behind his eyes. "I wonder which it is." The radio on his belt shattered the moment with a burst of static and panic. "Command! This is Bravo Team!" The voice crackled with interference and raw fear. "We've got contact. Multiple hostiles. They're everywhere. Grid reference unknown. We're taking fire. Position compromised. Rodriguez is down. Repeat, Rodriguez is down." Static consumed the transmission. Bishop's composure flickered. Seren's didn't. The door burst open. Garrett Thorne filled the frame, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and genuine terror. Four more of my men just went dark. His eyes locked onto Seren with murderous intensity. Bravo team walked into the same trap. Where? Bishop was already standing. Unknown. Signal cut before they could transmit coordinates. Garrett advanced on Seren, every step radiating violent promise. But I know someone who can tell us exactly where they are. He reached for her throat. Grid reference Delta 7. The words stopped him mid-motion. Seren's voice cut through the room like a blade. Quiet, measured, absolutely certain. Eastern Ravine, 340 meters from Landing Zone Alpha, the narrow section where the terrain funnels into a natural choke point. Every person in the room went still. What did you say? Garrett's hand hovered inches from her neck, frozen by confusion more than restraint. Your men are in the Eastern Ravine. Her eyes remained fixed on a point somewhere beyond his shoulder. The water echo in the radio background indicates proximity to the seasonal stream. Great horned owl calls in the transmission, species-specific territorial patterns suggesting elevation between 1,200 and 1,500 feet. Audio decay curve indicates enclosed space with rock walls on at least two sides. Behind the mirror, Knox Everhart stopped breathing. That level of tactical audio analysis from fragmentary transmission data required training that civilian electrical contractors simply didn't possess. It required skills that most military intelligence officers didn't possess. It required something else entirely. That's impossible, Vance whispered. She heard maybe 8 seconds of garbled radio traffic. I know. Knox's voice had gone hollow. I know it's impossible. In the interrogation room, Garrett stared at Seren like she'd suddenly transformed into something unrecognizable. The fury that had driven him moments ago now competed with confusion and something that might have been the first flickering of doubt. How? The word came out strangled. How do you know that? She didn't answer, simply sat there, waiting, her hands still folded on the table with the kind of stillness that spoke of endless patience and absolute certainty. Bishop pulled out his phone, dialing with fingers that maintained their steadiness through visible effort. Command, I need immediate satellite coverage on grid reference Delta 7, Eastern Ravine, 340 meters from LZ Alpha. A pause. Just do it. Now. 90 seconds crawled past in suffocating silence. Then his phone buzzed with an incoming message. He read it, and something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly. Something more calculated, more dangerous. Thermal signatures confirmed. 10 heat sources in the exact location she specified. He looked at Seren with eyes that held new depths of interest. It seems our civilian contractor has skills that weren't listed in her personnel file. Garrett's hand finally dropped to his side. I don't care how she knows. I care about getting my people back. Then perhaps... Bishop's smile returned, sharper now, edged with implications that made Knox's instincts scream warning. We should let our guest demonstrate her capabilities in the field. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Commander Hadley Pierce arrived 17 minutes later, his authority sweeping through the administrative building like a cold front. 52 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of command presence that made junior officers instinctively straighten their spines. He absorbed the situation through rapid-fire briefings, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Let me understand this correctly. His voice carried the dangerous calm of someone containing significant anger. We have a civilian contractor, currently held on suspicion of espionage, Sibadiji, who somehow analyzed fragmentary radio traffic to pinpoint the exact location of our missing personnel. Yes, sir. Knox handed over his preliminary assessment. Her capabilities exceed anything in her documented background. Breathing patterns, physical positioning, stress responses, none of it aligns with civilian training. Pierce studied Seren through the one-way mirror. She hadn't moved since providing the coordinates, hadn't asked for water, hadn't requested legal representation, just sat there, breathing that measured 4-count rhythm, waiting for something that only she seemed to understand. Recommendation? Knox hesitated. Sir, I believe we should include her in the rescue operation. Are you out of your mind? Garrett materialized at his shoulder, fury radiating from every pore. She's a spy. She's the reason my men are out there, and you want to hand her a weapon and let her lead us into another trap? With respect, Master Chief, if she wanted to set traps, she wouldn't have revealed she could analyze tactical audio. Knox kept his voice level. She gave us the location. If she's working with hostiles, that makes no tactical sense. Unless the location is bait, then we'll know soon enough. Pierce made his decision with the swift certainty of 30 years in command. She goes with the rescue team. Cuffed, tethered, with standing orders to neutralize her at the first sign of betrayal. He turned to face Garrett directly. "You're leading the operation, Master Chief. If she's setting a trap, you'll be the first one to spring it." Garrett's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Fine. When she proves me right, I'll handle the consequences personally." The rescue team assembled in the staging area within 45 minutes. 8 operators, all veterans of multiple deployments, all carrying enough firepower to level a small building. Night vision equipment, thermal imaging, communications gear, the full technological arsenal of American Special Operations capability. Seren stood among them like a ghost, her wrists still bound by a 6-foot tether that connected to Garrett's tactical belt. Close enough to control, far enough to maneuver if she tried something, the perfect distance for suspicion. Petty Officer First Class Rowan Ashford checked her weapon with practiced efficiency while stealing glances at the prisoner. 31 years old, one of the few women to survive Bud's training, she'd built her career on reading people and situations with uncanny accuracy. Something about Seren nagged at her, the way she held her shoulders, the micro movements of her fingers. It reminded her of someone, something, from a training program she'd participated in years ago. A program that officially didn't exist. But that was impossible. Rowan had washed out of that program. The psychological requirements had exceeded her tolerance. She'd been told the whole thing was discontinued shortly after. So, why did this blue-haired civilian move like the operatives she'd trained alongside? Silas Drummond approached Seren while the others conducted final equipment checks. His weathered face held none of Garrett's hostility, only a deep, abiding curiosity that had served him well across 35 years of service. "You're not what you appear to be," he said quietly. "Are you?" She didn't respond, but her eyes, for just an instant, softened with something that might have been acknowledgement. A crack in the mask so brief that anyone less experienced would have missed it entirely. "I've been doing this a long time," Silas continued. "Seen spies, seen traitors, seen enemy operatives who could fool polygraphs and body language experts." He leaned closer. "You're none of those things. I don't know what you are yet, but I know what you're not." Still nothing, but the quality of her silence had shifted somehow. Less stonewall, more careful evaluation. "Mount up!" Garrett's command cut through the night. "No lights, no noise. We go in dark. Anyone, and I mean anyone, who compromises this operation will answer to me personally." His eyes fixed on Seren as he delivered the final words. The threat couldn't have been clearer if he'd written it in letters of fire. They moved out in tactical formation, 8 operators and 1 prisoner disappearing into the wilderness that bordered the base. The darkness swallowed them completely within 50 meters, that profound blackness that existed only far from civilization, where the sky pressed down like a physical weight, and every sound amplified into potential threat. Seren matched their pace without effort. Her feet found stable ground instinctively, avoiding loose rocks and dead branches that would have announced their presence to anyone listening. Even cuffed, even tethered, she moved through the darkness like she'd been born to it, like darkness was less an obstacle and more a natural environment. "No flashlights," she said quietly, her first words since leaving the staging area. "Light makes targets." Garrett yanked her tether. "I give the orders here." "Then give the order." "But if you use lights, your men die tonight." He wanted to argue. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to put this woman in her place, to establish dominance, to prove that she didn't get to tell Navy SEALs how to operate. But something in her voice, that absolute certainty, made him hesitate. "Night vision only," he growled to his team. "Maintain radio silence." They pressed deeper into the wilderness. The terrain rose sharply, forcing them to climb through increasingly treacherous ground. Rocks slick with moisture, roots that grabbed at boots like skeletal fingers, branches that reached across the path with malicious intent. The military-grade night vision technology she's using started in special operations. Now, these same systems protect executives and high-value assets worldwide through advanced security solutions. Rowan found herself moving closer to Seren, drawn by that nagging familiarity she couldn't quite place. The prisoner climbed with her hands bound in front of her, using technique that spoke of extensive mountain warfare training. Her grip positions, her weight distribution, the way she used momentum rather than brute strength, all of it precise, Practiced, professional. I need you to climb this rock face, Garrett ordered when they reached a 20-foot vertical obstacle. Show us you can actually do something useful. Uncuff me and I will. Not a chance. Seren studied the rock face for approximately 3 seconds. Then she began climbing with her hands still bound together. The technique was flawless. She used her forearms as a unit, jamming them into cracks, leveraging her body weight with geometric precision. Her feet found holds that the operator's night vision barely registered. She reached the top in 47 seconds. Silas ascended next, his experienced eyes studying the holds she'd used. When he reached the top, he grabbed her hands without asking permission, turning them over to examine her palms in the dim starlight. Calluses. Distinctive calluses in a pattern he recognized. The kind that came from years of handling tactical rope systems. The kind that civilian electricians never developed. "Who trained you?" he asked quietly. She pulled her hands back. "Nobody you'd know?" "Try me." But Garrett's voice cut off any response. "Movement ahead." Thermal signatures. Looks like we found them. The ravine opened before them exactly where Seren had indicated. A narrow channel carved through ancient rock by millennia of water flow. The seasonal stream gurgled somewhere in the darkness, providing both landmark and cover noise. "I'm reading 6 signatures in the central depression," one of the operators reported. "Bound but alive. No visible guards in immediate proximity." "That's wrong," Seren's voice carried quiet certainty. "There should be guards. Check elevated positions. Rock outcroppings at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Garrett almost dismissed her words. Almost. But something made him redirect his thermal scanner toward the positions she'd indicated. 2 heat signatures, barely visible against the cool stone. Positioned for overlapping fields of fire that would have caught the rescue team in a deadly crossfire. "Holy," Lieutenant Marlowe Sinclair breathed. "How did she—" Questions later, Garrett's voice had lost some of its hostility, replaced by grudging professional respect. "Neutralize those positions. Quiet." 2 operators peeled off, moving with the silent efficiency of men who had done this hundreds of times. 60 seconds later, 2 thermal signatures went cold. "Positions clear, moving to recover hostages." They descended into the ravine. The 6 missing SEALs lay bound in a rough circle, gagged but conscious. Relief flooded their eyes as their teammates approached with cutting tools and medical equipment, but something was wrong. Seren felt it before anyone else did. A change in the air pressure, a subtle shift in the acoustic properties of the ravine, the kind of warning that required training to recognize and instinct to interpret. "Get down!" she screamed, throwing herself at Garrett. The world exploded into chaos. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions that hadn't existed on any thermal scan. Rounds cracked through the air, sparking off rocks, punching into equipment. The rescue team scattered for cover, returning fire at enemies they could barely see. "Contact! Multiple contacts! They're everywhere!" Rowan found herself pressed against a boulder, her weapon up, searching for targets in the strobing darkness. The ambush had been perfect, too perfect. Someone had known exactly where the rescue team would approach, exactly how they would deploy, exactly where the vulnerable moments would occur. Someone had told them. Her eyes found Seren in the chaos. The civilian was still standing, exposed, not seeking cover like a normal person would. Instead, she was studying the muzzle flashes with an expression of intense concentration. 4 shooters, Seren announced, her voice cutting through the gunfire with impossible calm. "North Ridge, spacing approximately 15 meters. They're firing in rotation to simulate larger force." "How do you know that?" Garrett shouted from his position behind a rock formation. "Because I can hear it." She turned toward Bishop Hale, who had somehow appeared at the edge of the ravine. "And because someone told them we were coming." Bishop's expression flickered, just for an instant, but it was enough. "That's ridiculous," he said smoothly. "We should focus on the immediate threat rather than—" A round cracked past Seren's head, close enough to disturb her blue hair. She didn't flinch. "Rowan." Seren's voice carried a quality it hadn't held before. Authority. Command. The kind of presence that made people listen. "I need you to trust me for the next 30 seconds. Can you do that?" Rowan's finger tightened on her trigger. Every instinct told her to stay in cover, to return fire, to follow standard protocols. But something else, something deeper, recognized the woman asking for her trust. "What do you need?" "Cover fire, North Ridge, sustained burst. Now." Rowan didn't hesitate. She rose from cover and unleashed a sustained burst toward the north ridge, rounds sparking off stone and sending the shooters scrambling for better positions. Seren moved. Later, when the survivors tried to describe what they'd witnessed, none of them could agree on the details. She was there, standing in the open. Then she wasn't. The darkness seemed to fold around her like a cloak, swallowing her completely. 23 seconds of silence followed. Then bodies started falling. Not gunshot victims. The impacts were wrong for that. These were bodies dropping with the boneless finality of consciousness suddenly terminated. One after another, 4 thuds in rapid succession, 4 threats eliminated without a single muzzle flash to mark their passing. Seren emerged from the darkness like she'd never left, not a hair out of place, breathing normally, completely untouched. 4 hostiles neutralized, area secure. Her voice carried no emotion whatsoever. "You can recover your people now." Garrett stared at her, with something approaching religious awe. What are you?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing good soldiers die for preventable reasons." She moved toward the bound SEALs, producing a knife for somewhere that shouldn't have been possible given her restraints. "Now, help me get them loose. We don't have much time." They worked quickly, cutting bonds, assessing injuries, preparing for evacuation. 2 of the hostages required immediate medical attention. The others were shaken but mobile. Through it all, one of the wounded SEALs kept staring at Seren with wide, disbelieving eyes. "It was you," he whispered when she approached to check his injuries. "In the darkness, before they caught us. Someone, moved through our captors like a ghost. Took down 2 of them before they could raise an alarm." His voice trembled. "Blue hair. I saw blue hair in the darkness." Marlo Sinclair heard the words and felt something cold settle in his chest. She was already here, before we arrived. She was already here trying to save them. "That's impossible," Garrett said, but the certainty had left his voice. She was in custody. She was exactly where she needed to be. Silas Drummond had been examining the neutralized hostiles. All 4 unconscious but alive, subdued with precise pressure point strikes that required expert anatomical knowledge. "Whatever she is, Master Chief, I don't think she's our enemy." The return journey should have been straightforward. Should have been a simple matter of reversing their approach, moving through terrain they had already traversed, returning to base with their recovered people. Did you catch that clue? Drop your theory in the comments, but I promise you, nobody is going to guess what's really hiding under that gray shirt. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Bishop Hale had fallen to the rear of the formation during the extraction. Natural enough, intelligence officers weren't typically frontline personnel, but Rowan noticed him typing rapidly on his phone, shielding the screen's glow with his body, sending messages to someone outside the operational channel. She moved closer, pretending to check her equipment. "Asset compromised, accelerate timeline, all traces." The words chilled her blood, but before she could react, before she could alert anyone, the night exploded again. This time, the ambush came from multiple directions. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions ahead and behind simultaneously. The rescue team, burdened with wounded, caught in a kill zone with nowhere to run. "Contact front and rear!" Operators scattered for whatever cover existed. Return fire crackled through the darkness. The wounded SEALs were dragged behind rocks by their teammates, adding protection to bodies already broken. And in the chaos, Bishop Hale produced a device from his pocket. It looked like a phone. It wasn't. He aimed it at Seren with deliberate precision, his cultured smile finally showing its true nature. "I had hoped to handle this more elegantly," he said, voice carrying over the gunfire with impossible calm. "But you've proven more capable than anticipated. No matter. The evidence I've planted in your phone will confirm your guilt. The Russian contacts, the financial transfers, everything needed to explain how a civilian contractor orchestrated the deaths of..." Seren moved. One moment she stood 10 feet from Bishop, tethered to Garrett, hands bound. The next moment she was between them, the tether somehow severed, her restraints falling away like they'd never existed. Bishop's finger tightened on his device. Whatever it did, EMP, explosive, toxin deployment, it never activated. Seren's hand closed around his wrist with force that made bones creak. Her other hand removed the device with surgical precision. "You were hunting me," she said quietly. "For how long?" "Long enough to know what you are." Bishop's smile remained fixed even as pain twisted his features. "Wraith program. The perfect soldiers who could operate in complete darkness. I thought you were all dead, killed in Syria 3 years ago. Reports of that were exaggerated. Clearly. His eyes flicked toward the ongoing firefight. But it doesn't matter. My associates will clean up this mess. Your friends will die. You'll die. And the network will continue its work. What network? One that understands balance. One that knows America has grown too powerful, too arrogant. One that's been working for years to level the playing field. His voice carried genuine conviction. You think I'm a traitor? I'm a patriot who serves something larger than flags and anthems. Silas Drummond appeared at Saren's shoulder, weapon trained on Bishop's head. What do you want to do with him? Secure him. He's going to answer a lot of questions when this is over. If any of us survive. Silas glanced toward the firefight, but showed no signs of diminishing. We're pinned down, outnumbered, and running low on ammunition. Serene's expression shifted. That strange stillness returned, but now it carried something else. Calculation, decision. The look of someone about to do something that couldn't be undone. I can fix that. She handed Bishop to Silas. Give me 90 seconds. To do what? But she was already gone, slipping into the darkness like water finding the path of least resistance. Rowan watched her disappear and felt memories surface that she'd spent years suppressing. The training facility in Montana, the sensory deprivation tanks, the exercises in absolute darkness that had broken something fundamental in her psyche. And the other candidates, the ones who hadn't broken, who had somehow learned to see without light, to fight without sight, to exist in darkness like it was their natural home. The Wraiths. Holy mother of... Rowan breathed. From the darkness surrounding their position, sounds began emerging. Not gunfire, not explosions. Something more primal. Impact of fist on flesh. Crack of joints hyperextended. Wheeze of air driven from lungs by precise strikes. One after another, the sources of enemy fire went silent. 43 seconds. That's how long it took. Seren emerged from the blackness like a phantom taking physical form. Her blue hair was disheveled now. A small cut marked her cheek, but she was alive, mobile, and the gunfire had stopped completely. 14 hostiles neutralized. She wiped blood from her face, not her own. Area is secure. We need to move before reinforcements arrive. Garrett Thorne stood frozen, weapon dangling at his side, staring at her with an expression that cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching fear. 14, he repeated. You took out 14 armed hostiles, in complete darkness, in less than a minute. By yourself. 43 seconds, actually. She moved past him toward the wounded SEALs. And it wasn't by myself. You provided the distraction I needed. A distraction. His voice had gone hollow. That's what we were, a distraction. Silas appeared, dragging a zip-tied Bishop Hale behind him. We need to move, Master Chief. Whatever questions you have can wait until we're back on base. The extraction proceeded in stunned silence. Personnel who had faced death dozens of times, who'd operated in the worst conditions humanity could devise, moved through the darkness like sleepwalkers. Not from fear. From the dawning realization that everything they thought that they understood about capability and limitation had just been shattered by a woman with blue hair who moved through darkness like she'd been born from it. Only Rowan seemed capable of processing what she'd witnessed. The Wraith program, she said quietly, falling into step beside Seren. I was there, at the beginning, before I washed out. I know. You remember me? I remember everyone who came through that program. Serene's eyes remained fixed on the path ahead. You had potential. Your failure wasn't capability. It was psychological. The darkness broke something in your mind that couldn't be repaired. It was too much, being blind like that, losing all reference points. For most people it is. A pause. You shouldn't have been recruited. The screening protocols were insufficient back then. And now? Now they're better. Seren's jaw tightened. Those of us who survive the training, we're different. Not better, just different. We learn to exist in conditions that destroy normal human cognition. The darkness isn't an obstacle for us. It's home, Rowan finished. That's what the instructor said. Make the darkness your home. Something like that. They continued in silence for several minutes. Then Rowan asked the question that had been building since she first recognized Seren's movement patterns. Why are you here? Really? What's your actual mission? Saren didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice carried weight that suggested careful consideration. There's a network. People in positions of power who've been selling American intelligence to hostile foreign services for years. Bishop Hale is connected to it. So are others. Her eyes swept the surrounding darkness, checking for threats. I've been hunting them for 14 months. Tonight was supposed to be the endgame. They forced my hand earlier than I intended. By staging the ambush, by making you look guilty, by making it necessary for me to reveal myself. Frustration flickered across her features. I was close. Another few weeks and I would have had enough evidence to bring down the entire network. Now Bishop knows what you are, and he's already sent messages to his associates. Saren nodded grimly. The operation is compromised, but we have Bishop, and with what's in his phone, in his messages, we might be able to salvage something. What about the others, the rest of the network? That's what I intend to find out. They reached the base perimeter as the first hints of dawn began lightening the eastern sky. Emergency vehicles clustered around the entrance. Medical teams stood ready to receive wounded, and a crowd had gathered, drawn by the emergency alerts and the rumors spreading through the installation like wildfire. Commander Pierce met them at the gate, his expression cycling through relief, confusion, and something harder to read. Report. 10 personnel recovered, sir. Garrett's voice had regained some of its professional steadiness. 2 wounded requiring immediate medical attention, 4 others with minor injuries. He paused, struggling with the next words. Lieutenant Commander Bishop Hale has been detained pending investigation. Charges include conspiracy, espionage, and attempted murder of American military personnel. The murmur that swept through the crowd carried shock and disbelief. Bishop Hale, one of their own, a trusted intelligence officer with 2 decades of service. And our guest? Pierce's eyes found Saren. Garrett hesitated. For a long moment, he seemed to be wrestling with something fundamental. When he spoke, each word came out like it cost him physically. Ms. Whitmore provided intelligence and tactical support that proved essential to mission success. Another pause. Without her intervention, we would have lost additional personnel, possibly the entire rescue team. Knox Everhart stepped forward, tablet in hand. Sir, I've been analyzing Ms. Whitmore's performance throughout the operation. Her capabilities significantly exceed anything in her documented background. Combat breathing patterns, tactical audio analysis, close quarters, combat proficiency, all of it consistent with Tier 1 Special Operations training. He glanced at Saren, or something beyond even that. What exactly are you suggesting, Chief? I'm suggesting we're not dealing with a civilian contractor. I'm suggesting we're dealing with someone whose actual background is classified above our clearance level. Knox met Pierce's eyes directly. I'm suggesting we need to contact the Pentagon before we proceed any further. Pierce absorbed this in silence. Then he turned to Saren, who had remained motionless throughout the exchange. Is there anything you'd like to tell us, Ms. Whitmore? Saren considered the question, considered the crowd of military professionals staring at her, with expressions ranging from hostility to awe, considered the consequences of continued deception versus controlled revelation. Contact Pentagon Security Operations, she said finally. Ask them to verify authentication code Phantom Eclipse 7. Operatives like her require specialized coverage that standard insurance can't provide. Executive protection policies now offer the same classified level security benefits originally designed for deep cover personnel. The call took 11 minutes. 11 minutes during which Saren stood in the middle of the crowd, every eye on her, every weapon within arm's reach, but none actually pointed in her direction. 11 minutes during which the sun continued its rise, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, driving back the darkness that had been her domain for so long. When Pierce lowered the phone, his face had gone ashen. Authentication confirmed. His voice sounded hollow. Ms. Whitmore is operating under classified authority that exceeds this installation's clearance level. He swallowed hard. The Pentagon is sending a verification team. Until they arrive, she is to be treated as a friendly asset with full cooperation. The reaction rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Garrett Thorne stared at Saren with an expression that seemed to physically pain him. This woman he'd dragged through the dirt. This woman he had humiliated before the entire base. This woman he'd accused of espionage and threatened with death. She outranked him in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. He struggled for words. I owe you an apology. No. Seren's voice carried no warmth, but no hostility either. Just flat statement of fact. You were doing your job, protecting your people from a perceived threat. The fact that your perception was wrong doesn't invalidate your intent. But Master Chief, she met his eyes with that same unsettling steadiness. Your men are safe. Bishop Hale is in custody. The immediate crisis has been resolved. What you owe me is not an apology. What you owe me is to focus on what comes next. And what comes next? Seren turned toward the detention facility where Bishop was being held. Now we find out exactly how deep this network goes. And we stop it before more American lives are lost. The interrogation resumed in a different room, with different dynamics. Seren sat across from Bishop Hale, no longer the prisoner. Now she was the hunter, finally able to operate without the constraints of her cover identity. Bishop looked diminished in the harsh institutional lighting. The elegant confidence had drained from his features, replaced by something cornered and calculating. His wrists were secured to the table. His smile remained fixed, but the edges had gone ragged. Wraith 9, he said. That's your designation, isn't it? I've read the files. What few exist. What you've read is disinformation. Seren's voice carried clinical detachment. The actual program was considerably different from what the records suggest. Different how? The files describe enhanced soldiers capable of operating in low-light conditions. The reality, she paused, letting the silence build. The reality is something else entirely. Then enlighten me. Bishop leaned forward despite his restraints. I'm genuinely curious. How does one learn to see in absolute darkness? How does one move through blackness like it's broad daylight? What exactly did they do to you? They didn't do anything to me. Seren's expression remained unreadable. They taught me to do something to myself, to rewire the way my brain processes sensory information, to use sound and air pressure and temperature variation the way normal people use light. A pause. They taught me to make the darkness my home. And the cost? There's always a cost. For the first time, something flickered across her features. Pain, quickly suppressed. Yes, there's always a cost. She leaned forward, matching his posture. But we're not here to discuss my history. We're here to discuss yours. The network you mentioned. The people you've been working with. Names, locations, operational details. Bishop's smile solidified again. You think I'm going to simply tell you everything? Because you have me in custody? Because my immediate operation failed? He shook his head slowly. The network is bigger than me. Bigger than this installation. Bigger than anything your Pentagon masters can imagine. Even if you break me, and you won't, what I know is only a fraction of the whole. Then give me that fraction. Why would I? Seren studied him for a long moment. Because you believe in what you're doing. You told me earlier, you think you're a patriot, someone serving a higher purpose, balancing power on a global scale. And I want to understand that purpose. I want to know what would drive a man with 23 years of honorable service to betray everything he swore to protect. Something shifted in Bishop's expression. The calculation faded, replaced by something more genuine, more dangerous. You want to understand? Fine. He settled back in his chair. America has become a monster, a superpower without check or balance. We invade countries on false pretenses. We topple governments that don't serve our interests. We spy on our allies and call it security. We drone strike wedding parties and call it collateral damage. His voice carried the conviction of a true believer. Someone needs to provide balance. Someone needs to ensure that American hegemony doesn't consume the entire world. By selling intelligence to hostile foreign services? By providing information to parties who can use it to check American expansion, to force accountability, to ensure that Washington's decisions carry consequences. And the soldiers who died because of that information, the operations that failed, the lives lost? Bishop's expression didn't waver. Acceptable casualties in a larger struggle. Regrettable, but necessary. Seren absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice carried something new. Not anger, something colder. You've convinced yourself that you're serving a higher purpose. That the deaths you've caused are justified by some abstract global balance. She leaned closer. But that's not what I see when I look at you, Bishop. I see a man who wanted to feel important, who wanted to believe his actions mattered on a scale larger than his actual position allowed. I see ego dressed up as ideology. Bishop's composure cracked. just for an instant, just enough. You don't know anything about... I know that real patriots don't sacrifice their countrymen for theoretical principles. I know that genuine idealists don't profit from their beliefs. And yes, we found your offshore accounts. I know that people who truly care about balance don't manipulate evidence to frame innocent women for crimes they didn't commit. She stood, moving away from the table. You're not a patriot, Bishop. You're not even a particularly sophisticated traitor. You're a small man who wanted to feel big, and you've been using ideology to justify selfishness. She reached the door. Think about that while you wait for the Pentagon team to arrive. Think about all the lives lost, so you could feel important. She left him there, stewing in her words, his conviction visibly shaken. Outside, Rowan Ashford waited in the corridor. That was harsh, Rowan said quietly. It was necessary. Seren began walking toward the exit. He needs to doubt himself. Doubt makes people talk, makes them want to justify, to explain, to prove they were right all along. You think he'll break? Eventually? But we don't have time to wait for eventually. Seren's jaw tightened. Before Bishop was detained, he sent messages. To the network, probably. Warning them. They'll be moving to cut losses, eliminate evidence, disappear back into whatever shadows they emerged from. So, what do we do? Seren stopped walking, turned to face Rowan with an expression that carried something she hadn't shown before. Vulnerability. Or maybe just exhaustion finally breaking through the mask. I need your help. Rowan blinked. My help? For what? Bishop has a collaborator on this base. Someone who helped him orchestrate tonight's events. Someone who has access to operational planning and security protocols. Seren's eyes swept the corridor, checking for observers. Senior Chief Brennan Locke. I've suspected him for months, but I never had enough evidence to act. Locke? Rowan's face showed surprise. He's been here for 15 years. Decorated record. Everyone trusts him. Which is exactly why he's so dangerous. Seren lowered her voice. With Bishop in custody, Locke will be panicking. He'll try to destroy evidence, contact the network, maybe even attempt to eliminate anyone who might connect him to the conspiracy. Including you. Including me. Seren nodded slowly. But I can't move against him without proof. My cover is already blown. If I accuse another respected officer without evidence, it will look like paranoia. Like the spy trying to throw suspicion on innocent people. So you need someone else to find the evidence. I need someone Locke doesn't suspect. Someone who can get close to him without triggering his defenses. Seren met Rowan's eyes directly. I need you to watch him. Document his communications, track his movements, and when he makes his move, and he will make a move, I need you to be ready. Rowan considered the request. It was dangerous, not physically. She'd faced worse threats than a nervous traitor, but professionally. If she was wrong, if Locke was innocent, the investigation would destroy her career. Then she thought about the SEALs they had rescued tonight, about the ambush that had nearly killed them all, about Bishop's smug certainty that his network would continue operating despite his capture. I'll do it, she said. What do you need me to look for? Seren's expression shifted, relief, quickly suppressed. Encrypted communications, unusual financial activity, any contact with personnel outside normal channels. She hesitated. And watch for him to approach you directly. Why me? Because he knows we talked tonight, because he might try to recruit you, or threaten you, or use you against me. Seren's voice carried genuine concern. He has information about my past, about the Wraith program. He might tell you things designed to make you doubt me. Would any of it be true? A long pause. Some of it. Probably. Rowan absorbed this in silence. Then tell me yourself. Whatever it is he might use, tell me first so I'm prepared. There isn't time for the full story. Seren checked her watch. But the short version, 3 years ago, there was an operation in Syria. A Wraith team was sent to eliminate a high-value target. The mission failed. Everyone was killed. Her voice remained steady, but something dark moved behind her eyes. Officially, I died with them. Unofficially, I survived. The program used my death to insert me into deep cover operations. Hunting networks exactly like the one Bishop serves. And the others, the rest of your team, gone. The word came out flat, final. I'm the only one left. Rowan reached out, touching Seren's arm. A gesture of solidarity that seemed to surprise both of them. I'm sorry. Don't be. They died doing what they trained for, what they believed in. Seren gently removed her arm from Rowan's grip. I intend to make sure their sacrifice meant something. That starts with taking down this network. Then let's get started. They separated, Rowan heading toward the operations center, where Locke would be coordinating the aftermath of the night's events. Seren returning to the administrative building, where the Pentagon verification team would soon arrive. The crisis decision-making she just demonstrated comes from training protocols developed for special operations commanders. These same frameworks are now available through executive leadership development programs. The sun had fully risen now, burning away the night and casting everything in harsh, unforgiving light. Personnel moved through their duties with the shell-shocked efficiency of people processing trauma. The attack, the rescue, the revelations, all of it would take time to process, to understand, to integrate into their understanding of how the world worked. Seren found a quiet corner and allowed herself 30 seconds of stillness, 30 seconds to process her own exhaustion, her own pain, her own memories of darkness and loss, and the terrible price of the abilities she'd developed. Then she buried it all, rebuilt her mask, and prepared for what came next. Because the mission wasn't over. Bishop was contained, but the network remained. Locke was still active. And somewhere in the shadows, other threats were already moving. The darkness would come again tonight. And when it did, Seren Whitmore would be ready. The next 60 seconds will change everything you think you know. Smash that like button if you're ready to see these seals eat their words. The encrypted message glowed on the tablet screen, each word burning into Seren's consciousness like a brand. Wraith 3, missing, Eastern Europe, 72 hours. She stood motionless in the medical bay doorway, her fingers still hovering over the device. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the sterile white walls. Behind her, the sounds of celebration drifted from the main compound. Laughter, relief, victory toasts raised to a mission accomplished. They had no idea. You look like someone just walked over your grave. Silas Drummond's voice cut through her thoughts. The Master Chief leaned against the corridor wall, arms crossed, studying her with those weathered eyes that missed nothing. A paper coffee cup dangled from his fingers, steam curling upward in lazy spirals. Seren tucked the tablet under her arm. Old habits. That message, the one that just came through. He pushed off the wall, taking 3 measured steps toward her. I've been doing this job for 26 years. I know the look of someone who just received orders they didn't want. With respect, Master Chief, my orders are classified above your clearance level. Probably true. He took a slow sip of coffee, never breaking eye contact. Also probably true that whatever's in that message is going to take you somewhere dangerous, somewhere dark. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Darkness is where I do my best work. I noticed. He gestured toward the compound's main building with his cup. Garrett's looking for you. He's got something to say. Figured you might want to hear it before you disappear into whatever shadow's calling your name. Seren glanced toward the building. Through the windows she could see figures moving, seals slapping backs, officers shaking hands, the normal rituals of military victory. Where is he? Rooftop observation deck. Said he needed fresh air. Silas paused. He also said he needed to apologize properly, without an audience. She nodded once, then walked past him toward the stairwell. His voice followed her. Whitmore. She stopped but didn't turn. Whatever you're about to face, whatever mission that message contains. His words were careful, measured. You don't have to face it alone, not anymore. For 3 heartbeats, she stood motionless. Then she continued walking, her boots echoing against the metal stairs as she climbed. The rooftop observation deck overlooked the entire Naval Special Warfare Command complex. From this height, the compound spread out like a tactical map. Training facilities, armories, barracks, the distant shimmer of the Pacific Ocean, catching the last rays of dying sunlight. Garrett Thorne stood at the railing, his massive frame silhouetted against the orange sky. His dress uniform was wrinkled from the day's chaos, his cover tucked under one arm. He didn't turn when the rooftop door opened. I used to come up here after particularly bad missions, he said quietly. When we lost people, when things went sideways. Standing here, watching the sun go down, it helped me remember that tomorrow would come, that there would be another chance to do better. Seren approached the railing, stopping 3 feet to his left. Close enough for conversation, far enough for combat spacing. Old habits. You wanted to speak with me. I wanted to apologize. He finally turned, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Shame. Genuine, crushing shame. What I said to you. What I did. In front of everyone. His jaw tightened. There's no excuse for it. You were protecting your people, protecting this base. From your perspective, I was an unknown threat during a crisis situation. Don't, his voice cracked slightly, don't make excuses for me. I didn't treat you like an unknown threat. I treated you like garbage, like you were nothing. He looked away, staring at the sunset. The darkness is our weapon. And looking at you, a streetlight glows brighter. He laughed bitterly. Those were my exact words. And then you walked into actual darkness and saved 11 lives while I stood there with my thumb up my rear end. Seren said nothing. She watched a patrol boat cutting across the distant harbor, its wake leaving white lines in the darkening water. I've been a SEAL for 14 years, Garrett continued. I've served with some of the finest operators this country has ever produced. I've seen courage that would make your heart stop. And I've never, he swallowed hard, I've never seen anyone move the way you moved in that warehouse, in that ammunition depot. It wasn't human. It was something else entirely. It was training, nothing more. Training. He turned to face her fully. What kind of training makes a person invisible in the dark? What kind of training lets someone neutralize 8 armed hostiles without making a single sound? What kind of training creates someone who can disarm a bomb with cuffed hands while 3 laser sights are painted on her chest? Seren finally met his gaze. The kind of training most people don't survive. Silence stretched between them. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Wraith program, Garrett said softly. I've heard whispers, rumors, stories that operators tell each other when the beer's flowing and the brass isn't listening. I always thought they were exaggerated. Ghost soldiers, shadow warriors, people who could walk through the walls and kill without leaving a trace. Stories often grow in the telling, but they're true, aren't they? His voice held wonder now, not accusation. The program exists. You exist. There are others like you, operating in places we can't see, doing things we can't imagine. Seren turned back to the sunset. What I can tell you is this. The threats facing this nation don't always come from enemies wearing uniforms. Sometimes the darkness contains monsters that conventional forces can't fight. And sometimes, she paused, sometimes you need people who are comfortable in that darkness, people who have made it their home. Darkness is our home, Garrett whispered. That's what your tattoo said. I saw it. When your shirt tore, you saw nothing. I saw everything. He stepped closer. The owl, the coordinates, the glow-in-the-dark ink that only shows up in complete blackness. I saw the scars on your back, the ones that look like someone tried to carve you apart with a combat knife. Serene's hand moved unconsciously toward her shoulder. The scar tissue there was thick, ropey, a permanent reminder of a warehouse in Damascus, 3 years ago, when her cover had been blown and extraction was 12 hours away. Those scars tell a story, Garrett said quietly, a story of someone who's been through the absolute worst that humanity can offer, and survived, and kept fighting. Everyone has scars, Master Chief. Not like yours. Not earned like yours were earned. He straightened, coming to attention. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you a debt that I can never repay. But I want you to know something. He executed a perfect salute, parade ground precise, the kind of salute reserved for flag officers and Medal of Honor recipients. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you call and I'll answer. That's not a promise from one operator to another. That's a promise from one warrior to someone who has proven themselves worthy of every respect this uniform represents. Seren studied his face for a long moment. Then she returned the salute, crisp, professional, an acknowledgement between equals. The mission isn't over, Master Chief Thorne. Bishop Hale was part of a larger network. The people who took your SEALs, who tried to frame me, who planted that bomb. They're still out there, and they've taken someone else, someone important. Wraith 3, she raised an eyebrow. I read the message over your shoulder in the medical bay, he admitted. My peripheral vision's pretty good. Despite herself, Seren almost smiled. Invasion of privacy, Master Chief. Situational awareness. He grinned, then sobered. You're going after them. Whoever has Wraith 3, you're going alone. That's the mission. It doesn't have to be. He stepped forward urgently. I can assemble a team, volunteers, people who wanted to make up for what happened today. We can provide support, extraction, backup. Negative. Where I'm going, conventional forces would be a liability, not an asset. Then at least let me do something. Intelligence support, communications relay, anything. Seren considered for a moment. Then she pulled the tablet from under her arm and handed it to him. Coordinates 37.42 north, 22.08 east. That's a safe house in Greece. If you don't hear from me within 72 hours, you contact Admiral Crane directly. You tell him Wraith 9 has gone dark, and Wraith 3's location is somewhere in the Balkans. He'll know what to do. Garrett memorized the coordinates, his lips moving silently as he committed them to memory. 72 hours, and if I hear from you before then you forget we ever had this conversation. She turned toward the rooftop door. And Garrett? He looked up at the sound of his first name. What you said this morning, about the darkness being your weapon. She paused at the door. You weren't entirely wrong. The darkness is a weapon, but it's not yours and it's not mine. It belongs to no one. The only question is whether you learn to move through it or let it consume you. She opened the door. Seren. She stopped. Come back alive. That's an order. The corner of her mouth curved upward. Master Chief, you don't have the clearance to give me orders. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click. This next story features someone who walked into a room full of generals with nothing but a coffee cup and walked out with their complete respect. Subscribe now because the next reveal will absolutely destroy everything you think you know about Hidden Warriors. The corridor leading to the secure communication center was empty at this hour. Most of the base personnel were either celebrating the successful rescue or filing after-action reports. The crisis was over, as far as they knew. Seren moved through the shadows between overhead lights, her footsteps silent on the polished floor. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning routes, calculating variables, assessing threats. Eastern Europe, the Balkans, Wraith 3. The last time she'd seen Marcus Cole, Wraith 3, had been 18 months ago in a safe house outside Bucharest. He'd been running an operation targeting a weapons trafficking network with connections to 3 different terrorist organizations. Standard Wraith assignment: infiltrate, identify, eliminate, extract. But something had gone wrong. The message said suspected compromise. That could mean anything from a blown cover to active capture. She pushed through the communications center door and found Rowan Ashford waiting for her. The former Wraith colleague sat at one of the monitoring stations, her tablet propped against the console. The harsh blue light from multiple screens illuminated her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw. I figured you'd come here eventually, Rowan said quietly. You need access to the classified network to pull information on Wraith 3's last known position. You should be in debriefing with the others. Already finished. Commander Pierce fast-tracked my statement. She stood, crossing her arms. Seren, we need to talk about what happened today, about Bishop, about what he had on me. Later? No, now. Rowan stepped into her path. Because what I'm about to tell you affects Wraith 3's situation directly. Seren went still. Explain. Bishop didn't just flip me. He had intelligence on Wraith operations. Deep intelligence. Things that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside the program. She swallowed hard. He knew about Marcus's mission in the Balkans. He mentioned it during one of our conversations, before the SEALs were taken, before any of this started. The implications crystallized in Seren's mind instantly. Bishop was connected to whatever compromised Marcus's operation. More than connected. I think he was running interference, feeding information to the network that took Marcus, making sure the program couldn't respond in time. Rowan's voice cracked. Seren, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he was doing. If I'd realized. How much did you tell him? Nothing about active operations. I swear on everything I hold sacred. He only asked about historical missions, training protocols, organizational structure. She shook her head miserably. I thought I was just giving him useless background information. I didn't realize he was building a map of our vulnerabilities. Seren processed this for 3 seconds. Then she moved past Rowan to the monitoring station, her fingers flying across the keyboard. What are you doing? Accessing Bishop's interrogation records. Admiral Crane authorized my full clearance during the phone call. If Bishop knew about Marcus's operation, he might know where they're holding him. The screens filled with data. Interrogation transcripts. Communication intercepts. Financial records showing payments to offshore accounts. There, Seren pointed at a string of coordinates embedded in one of Bishop's encrypted messages. 41.79 north, 22.47 east. Rowan leaned over her shoulder. That's North Macedonia, near the border with Kosovo. Marcus's operation was tracking weapons moving through that exact corridor. Seren's eyes narrowed. This wasn't random. Someone specifically targeted him because he was getting too close to something. To what? Seren scrolled through more data. Financial records, shell companies, names that appeared again and again across multiple transactions. Consortium, she read aloud. That word keeps appearing in Bishop's communications, always capitalized, like a proper noun. A organization name? More than that. Seren pulled up another file. Look at the payment amounts, the dates, the destinations. She traced the connections with her finger. This isn't just a weapons trafficking operation. This is a shadow network with tendrils in 6 different countries, intelligence services, military contractors, corporate security firms, all connected to this one word. Rowan's face went pale. Bishop said something when he was being arrested, something about balance of power, about making sure no single nation became too dominant. He wasn't just selling secrets, he was part of a coordinated effort to destabilize American military operations. Seren downloaded the files to a secure drive, and Marcus stumbled into the middle of it. So what do we do? Seren ejected the drive and pocketed it. We don't do anything. You stay here. You continue your debriefing. You tell no one what we've discovered. And you? I'm going to Macedonia. I'm going to find Marcus, and I'm going to burn this consortium to the ground. Alone, against an organization with international reach and resources we can't even estimate, Rowan grabbed her arm. Seren, that's not a mission, that's a death sentence. I've survived death sentences before, she pulled free gently. Rowan, listen to me. What Bishop had on you, whatever leverage he used, it doesn't define you. It doesn't erase the person you were before or the person you can become after. I betrayed the program. You were manipulated by someone who spent years learning exactly how to exploit good people. Seren held her gaze. The question isn't what you did. The question is what you do next. Rowan's eyes glistened. What can I do? Stay alive, stay alert. When I find Marcus, I'll need a secure communication line back to friendly territory. Someone I can trust to relay information without questions. You trust me? After everything? I trust that you want to make this right. That's enough for now. Seren turned toward the door, but Rowan's voice stopped her again. The coordinates in Macedonia. That area is a dead zone. No cellular coverage, no satellite uplinks, complete electronic isolation. I know. How will you communicate? How will anyone even know if you're still alive? Seren smiled. It was a cold expression. The smile of someone who had spent years operating in places where help couldn't reach. That's the point, Rowan. Where I'm going, no one can see, no one can hear, no one can find me. She pulled open the door. Unless I want them to. The door closed behind her, and Rowan was alone with the glowing screens and the weight of everything that had happened. The armory was locked at this hour, but locks had never been an obstacle for someone with Seren's training. She moved through the security measures like water flowing around stones, each motion precise, practiced, invisible. Inside, rows of weapons gleamed under emergency lighting, rifles, pistols, shotguns, enough firepower to equip a small army. She ignored the standard equipment. What she needed wouldn't be found on any official inventory list. Behind a false panel in the back wall, accessible only to those who knew exactly where to look, lay the equipment she required. Stealth gear designed by agencies that didn't officially exist. Weapons that left no ballistic signature. Communication devices that bounced signals through so many relays they became untraceable. She selected her loadout with care. Light, mobile, lethal only when necessary. I figured I'd find you here. Knox Everhart stepped out of the shadows, his weathered face illuminated by the emergency lights. The interrogation specialist looked exhausted, but his eyes were sharp. Chief Warrant Officer, you should be resting. So should you. He leaned against a weapons rack, watching her work. Instead, you're gearing up for an unauthorized solo operation in hostile territory, against an unknown enemy with unknown resources, based on intelligence gathered from a known traitor. Your point? My point is that I've been doing this job for a very long time, long enough to know when someone's walking into a situation they might not walk out of. He pushed off the rack, stepping closer, long enough to know that even the best operators can benefit from backup. I work alone. Maybe that's the problem. Saren's hands stilled over her equipment. She turned to face him. What do you know about the Wraith program, Chief Warrant Officer? Officially, nothing. It doesn't exist. He met her gaze steadily. Unofficially, I know that certain operations over the past decade have succeeded in ways that defy conventional explanation. I know that enemies of this nation have disappeared without trace. I know that battles have been won in complete darkness by soldiers who left no footprints. And you concluded? I concluded that there are things happening in defense of this country that most people will never know about. Things done by people who sacrifice everything, including their names, their identities, their very existence. He straightened. People like you. Seren resumed her equipment check. What do you want, Knox? I want to help, not in the field. I know I'd be a liability in whatever environment you were walking into. But here, on this end. He pulled a small device from his pocket. This is a burst transmitter modified to my personal specifications. Range of 200 miles under optimal conditions. Encrypted beyond anything currently in military inventory. He held it out to her. You find Marcus Cole. You find whatever's holding him. You press that button once for extraction needed. Twice for mission complete. 3 times 4. He paused. 3 times means everything's gone wrong and we should burn your files. Seren looked at the device for a long moment. Then she took it, tucking it into her gear. Why? Because I read your service record, the real one. Admiral Crane gave me access after everything settled down. His voice softened. I read about Syria, about the convoy, about 12 hours of evading enemy forces with 2 broken ribs and a collapsed lung. I read about the things you did to survive, the things you did to protect the intelligence you were carrying. That was a long time ago. It was 3 years ago, and what you did then saved operations that saved thousands of lives. He stepped back. So when you find yourself in the dark, surrounded by enemies, wondering if anyone even knows you're still fighting, remember that someone does, and we're waiting to bring you home. Seren finished securing her gear. She pulled on a dark jacket, concealing the weapons beneath. To anyone looking, she appeared to be nothing more than a tired civilian worker heading home after a long shift. Knox. Yes? The interrogation techniques you use today, the way you read Bishop's tells, the psychological pressure you applied. She adjusted her collar. That wasn't standard training, that was something else. His face remained impassive. I've picked up a few things over the years. I'm sure you have. She moved toward the armory door. When I get back, we should compare notes. I have a feeling we might have more in common than either of us realized. Then she was gone, slipping through the door and into the night. Knox stood alone in the armory, surrounded by weapons and silence. After a long moment, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never expected to use. It's Everhart, he said quietly. The package is moving. Destination, Macedonia. Timeline, 72 hours. He listened to the response and, understood. I'll maintain position here. And sir, she's even better than the files suggested. Whoever trained her knew exactly what they were doing. He ended the call and walked out of the armory, leaving the shadows empty behind him. The advanced stealth technology she accessed represents equipment now available in high-end tactical solutions. These military-derived concealment protocols offer the same classified-level capabilities originally developed for special operations, now adapted for professional security environments requiring uncompromising protection standards. The transport was waiting at the airfield's far edge, a modified cargo plane with no markings, no registration numbers, no official existence. The pilot didn't ask questions when Seren climbed aboard. He'd been briefed to expect a passenger. He hadn't been told anything else. That was how the Wraith program operated. Compartmentalized information, deniable assets, missions that officially never happened. Seren settled into the cargo bay as the engines roared to life. In her pocket, Knox's burst transmitter pressed against her thigh, a lifeline, something she rarely had. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift to Marcus Cole. They'd trained together years ago in a facility buried deep beneath the Nevada desert. He'd been Wraith 3. She'd been Wraith 9. Different specializations, different skill sets, but the same fundamental purpose: to operate in darkness, to become invisible, to protect the nation against threats that conventional forces couldn't address. Marcus had always been the more cautious of their cohort, methodical, patient, the kind of operator who would spend weeks building a cover identity before making a single move. If someone had compromised him, they'd done so through methods that weren't obvious, or through betrayal, like Bishop, the consortium. She turned the word over in her mind. A consortium implied cooperation, partnership, multiple parties working toward a common goal. But what goal? Destabilization, profit, power, all of the above, probably. Organizations like that rarely had simple motivations. The plane leveled out at cruising altitude. Outside the small porthole window, darkness stretched in every direction. No stars visible, just endless black. Home, she thought. This is home. 12 hours later, the plane touched down on an abandoned runway in northern Greece. Saren was out the door before the propellers stopped spinning, her gear bag slung across her back, her eyes already scanning the terrain. The safe house was 3 miles north, a small farmhouse that hadn't been farmed in 20 years, owned by a shell company that traced back through 17 layers of corporate obscurity to a Pentagon black budget nobody talked about. She reached it in 40 minutes, moving through the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost. The building appeared abandoned, shuttered windows, overgrown vegetation, the kind of place travelers would walk past without a second glance. Inside, behind a concealed panel in the floor, lay equipment she'd need for the next phase. More weapons, maps, intelligence files, a motorcycle with enough modifications to make it untraceable. She spread the maps across a dusty table, tracing routes with her finger. The coordinates from Bishop's files pointed to a location in North Macedonia's mountainous interior, isolated, defensible, perfect for holding a prisoner, or a corpse. She pushed that thought aside. Marcus was alive. He had to be. The consortium wouldn't have taken him just to kill him. They wanted something. Information. Leverage. Something only a Wraith operative could provide. That meant she had time. Not much, but enough. She committed the routes to memory, then burned the maps. No evidence, no trace, no proof she'd ever been here. By the time the sun rose over the Greek mountains, she was already gone. The border crossing into North Macedonia took 6 hours of careful navigation. Official checkpoints were out of the question. Her face, her fingerprints, her entire biological signature was in databases she couldn't trust, hadn't been compromised. Instead, she moved through the mountains on foot, following paths that didn't appear on any map. Animal trails, smuggler routes, paths worn into the earth by centuries of people who'd needed to move without being seen. The terrain grew harsher as she climbed, rocky outcrops giving way to dense forest, then bare ridgelines swept by bitter wind. Winter was coming early this year. She could smell it in the air, feel it in the dropping temperature. By nightfall, she was within 5 miles of the target coordinates. She found a sheltered hollow between 2 boulders and settled in to observe. From this vantage point, she could see the valley below, a cluster of buildings that might have been a mining operation once. Now they bristled with antennas, security cameras, motion sensors, and guards. At least 15 visible, probably twice that many in rotation. Professional equipment, professional movement patterns. These weren't local militia or amateur mercenaries. These were trained operators. She pulled out a small telescope, scanning the compound systematically. Guard positions, patrol routes, blind spots, entry points, exit strategies. The main building was a converted warehouse, 3 stories tall, with reinforced doors and windows that had been replaced with bulletproof glass. Power came from generators on the east side, communications from a satellite array on the roof. If Marcus was anywhere, he was in that warehouse. Getting in wouldn't be impossible. Difficult, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But not impossible. Getting out with a potentially injured prisoner while 15 to 30 armed guards tried to stop her? That was a different calculation entirely. She settled deeper into her hollow and began to wait. Patience was a weapon too, and she had 72 hours, most of them still remaining. The first 24 hours revealed patterns. Guard rotations every 4 hours. Shift changes at midnight, 4 a.m., 8 a.m., noon, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. 32 guards total, working in teams of 8. Professional, but predictable. Supply deliveries twice daily. A truck arriving at 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., staying for approximately 40 minutes each time. During deliveries, the main gate remained open, and guards were distracted with inspection and unloading. The satellite array activated every 6 hours for burst transmissions. 15 minutes of activity, then silence. Whatever data they were sending, it was going somewhere far away. On the second day, she spotted something that changed everything. A figure in the warehouse's third-floor window. Brief glimpse, dark hair, familiar build, hands pressed against the glass. Marcus. He was alive. Contained, but alive. The glimpse lasted only seconds before guards pulled him back from the window. But it was enough. She had visual confirmation. She had a location. She had a mission. Now she just needed a plan that didn't get them both killed. Executive protection coverage for specialized operatives working in hostile territories has evolved significantly since intelligence agencies began requiring comprehensive field support. Crisis extraction insurance now includes real-time tracking, rapid response protocols, and strategic rescue coordination specifically designed for professionals operating in high-risk environments. The third night, she moved. Not toward the compound, not yet. Instead, she circled wide, approaching from the northeast where the terrain provided maximum concealment. There was something she needed to check first: the communications array. Every organization like this needed to communicate with their masters, and every communication left traces. If she could access their transmission protocols, even briefly, she might identify who was really behind the consortium. She reached the compound's perimeter at 2:17 a.m., during the gap between patrol routes she'd mapped over the previous days. The motion sensors were sophisticated, but not impossible. She moved in the dead zones, her body low to the ground, her breathing controlled. The satellite array stood on a platform 30 feet above the main building's roof. Accessing it would require climbing. Climbing would require time she might not have. But she didn't need to reach the array itself. The cables running from the array to the building's interior passed through a junction box mounted on the exterior wall. Standard installation. Standard vulnerability. She reached the junction box in 17 minutes, bypassing 2 additional security measures through methods that would have seemed impossible to anyone watching. The lock yielded in 4 seconds. Inside, fiber optic cables glowed with data flow. She attached a small device to the main trunk line, passive intercept. It would record everything transmitted over the next cycle, then broadcast the data in a compressed burst to a satellite Knox had access to. Evidence. Proof. Something that could bring down the entire network if she didn't survive. The device seated with a soft click. She closed the junction box, restored the lock to its original state, and melted back into the darkness. 15 minutes later, the satellite array activated for its scheduled transmission. Somewhere, her device was recording everything. Now came the hard part. The supply truck arrived at 6:58 a.m., 2 minutes early. The driver looked tired. The guards looked bored. Perfect. Serene had positioned herself beneath the truck during the night, wedged into the undercarriage in a position that would have been agonizing for anyone without her training. As the vehicle rolled through the gates, she moved with it, invisible to the cameras and guards above. The truck stopped inside the compound. Doors slammed. Voices called out in a mixture of languages: Russian, Serbian, English, the international tongue of mercenary operations. She dropped from the undercarriage while the guards focused on unloading crates. A quick roll took her into the shadow of a storage container. From there, she had a clear line to the warehouse's service entrance. 14 seconds to cover 50 feet of open ground. She waited for the perfect moment. A guard turning away, another guard examining a crate, a third guard laughing at something someone said. Then she moved. To anyone watching, she would have been a blur, a trick of light, a shadow that wasn't quite where it should be. By the time their eyes registered movement, she was already inside. The warehouse's interior was cooler than outside, temperature controlled for whatever equipment lined the walls, computer terminals, monitoring stations. The kind of setup that suggested surveillance on a massive scale. She moved through the ground floor systematically, cataloging everything she saw: server racks, communication equipment, personnel files visible on unattended screens. The consortium wasn't just an organization, it was an intelligence operation. They were monitoring military communications across 6 different countries. NATO exercises, troop movements, equipment deployments, everything that conventional intelligence agencies would kill to access. And they had it all. Saren photographed everything she could reach, then continued to the stairwell. 2nd floor, 3rd floor, Marcus. The stairs were clear, too clear. No guards, no cameras, almost like they wanted someone to reach the 3rd floor. She paused at the landing, her instincts screaming warnings. Trap. This has to be a trap. But Marcus was up there. She'd seen him through the window, and she couldn't leave without him. She pushed through the door. The third floor was a single open space divided by glass partitions into what looked like interrogation cells. Most were empty. One was not. Marcus Cole sat in a metal chair, his hands bound behind his back, his face a map of bruises and cuts. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes widened. Seren? Holy, he caught himself. How did you? Later, she moved toward his cell, scanning for security measures. Are you mobile? Ribs are cracked, left ankle's sprained, but I can move. She reached the cell door. Electronic lock. Sophisticated but not impossible. The guards, Marcus said urgently. Seren, this is a trap. They wanted someone to come for me. I know. She finished cracking the lock and pulled the door open. Inside, she cut his bonds with a knife from her boot, then helped him stand. He winced, but stayed upright. How many? She asked. At least 20, maybe more. They've been rotating interrogators. Someone high up is running this operation personally. Did you get a name? Marcus nodded grimly. Volkov, Ivan Volkov, former Russian intelligence, supposedly died in 2019. Apparently not. She guided him toward the stairwell, but the door burst open before they reached it. 6 guards poured through, weapons raised, shouting commands in Russian. Seren moved. The first guard went down before he finished his sentence, her elbow crushing his windpipe. The second took a knee strike to the groin, followed by a palm heel to the nose. The third managed to squeeze his trigger, but she'd already redirected his barrel, and the shots went wild. 4, 5, 6. Each fell in sequence, her movements flowing from one engagement to the next without pause. By the time the last guard hit the ground, less than 8 seconds had passed. Marcus stared at her with something approaching awe. That was, we need to move, now. She pulled him toward the window she'd seen him in at earlier. Below, the compound was erupting with activity. Alarms blaring, floodlights sweeping, guards converging from every direction. There's no way out, Marcus said. They'll cut us down before we reach the perimeter. Seren smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Who said anything about the perimeter? She shot out the window with 2 precise rounds, then pulled a device from her vest. Grappling line, military grade, rated for 300 pounds. Hold on to me. What are you? She didn't give him time to finish the question. She wrapped one arm around his waist, fired the grappling hook at the communications tower across the compound, and jumped. The line caught. Held. They swung across the open ground, 50 feet above the heads of guards, who were still trying to figure out where they'd gone. They hit the tower platform hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Seren was on her feet immediately, Marcus struggling to follow. The roof, she said. Helicopter pad. I saw them use it yesterday for resupply. They won't leave a helicopter sitting unguarded. They won't have a choice. She pressed a button on her vest. Below, the compound exploded into chaos. The charges she'd planted during her reconnaissance. Power generators, fuel storage, communications arrays, everything going up simultaneously. In the confusion, no one noticed 2 figures sprinting across the rooftop toward the helicopter pad. The aircraft was a commercial model, modified for cargo transport. One guard stood beside it, confusion written across his face as he tried to understand what was happening to his base. Seren put him down with a single strike before he could raise his weapon. Can you fly this? Marcus asked. I can fly anything. She slid into the pilot's seat, her hands moving across controls with practiced ease. The rotors began to spin. Below, guards finally realized what was happening and started shooting. Bullets pinged off the helicopter's armor plating as it lifted into the air. Seren tilted the nose and accelerated, climbing away from the compound as secondary explosions continued to rock the buildings below. They cleared the perimeter, cleared the mountain ridge, cleared the immediate danger zone. Behind them, the consortium's base burned. Marcus slumped in the co-pilot seat, one hand pressed against his cracked ribs. How did you know where to find me? Bishop Hale. He was part of the network. We captured him, got intelligence on their operations. Bishop? Marcus shook his head slowly. I knew there was a mole, someone feeding them information about wraith movements. But Bishop, that's higher up than I expected. He mentioned something, a larger network, something called the Consortium. She adjusted their heading toward the Greek safe house. Does that mean anything to you? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. During the interrogations, they asked about things that didn't make sense at first. Not just military intelligence, financial systems, political vulnerabilities, social pressure points. He turned to look at her. They weren't just collecting information, Seren. They were building a playbook, a comprehensive strategy for destabilizing Western nations without ever firing a shot. Economic warfare? More than that. Targeted disruption. Take down the right systems at the right time, and you can create cascading failures across entire societies. Financial markets, power grids, communication networks, emergency services. He winced as the helicopter hit turbulence. They called it the long game. 20 years of preparation for a single coordinated strike. Seren processed this information with cold clarity. How close are they to ready? I don't know, but the fact that they were willing to expose an asset like Bishop, willing to risk an operation like the one at your naval base, he met her eyes. That suggests they're entering final stages. Whatever's coming, it's coming soon. The helicopter continued east, chasing the rising sun. Leadership development programs now incorporate crisis management protocols originally designed for intelligence operatives facing extreme situations. These executive training courses provide comprehensive instruction in high-pressure decision-making, strategic threat assessment, and resilient leadership frameworks developed through decades of real-world operational experience. The Greek safe house looked the same as when she'd left it. Abandoned, forgotten, perfect. She set the helicopter down in a field a quarter-mile away, then helped Marcus cover the remaining distance on foot. By the time they reached the farmhouse, dawn was breaking fully, painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Inside, she guided Marcus to a cot in the corner and began treating his injuries. The ribs were bruised, not broken. A relief. The ankle was worse than he'd admitted, swelling already visible, but nothing that would prevent eventual recovery. The burst transmitter, Marcus said as she worked. In your pocket. That's not standard Wraith equipment. A gift from someone at the naval base. Someone you trust? Seren paused, considering the question. Someone who earned a chance to be trusted? That's new for you. She finished wrapping his ankle and sat back on her heels. Things change. People change. Even people like us. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. 3 years ago, you died, according to official records. Syria convoy, enemy contact, KIA? I know. Why did you stay dead? She stood, moving to the window to check the perimeter. Because dead people don't have to explain themselves, don't have to justify their choices, don't have to pretend they're something they're not. And now? Now. She watched the sun rise higher, light flooding the valley below. Now I'm starting to wonder if being dead is really the same as being free. Her hand moved to the burst transmitter. 1 press for extraction needed. 2 for mission complete. She pressed the button twice. Somewhere, thousands of miles away, Knox Everhart would receive the signal. He would relay the information to Admiral Crane. Extraction assets would be mobilized. The official machinery of rescue would begin grinding into motion. They'll want debriefing, Marcus said quietly. Full accounting of everything the consortium knows, everything they planned. Yes. That could take months, years, maybe. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens to us, after the debriefing, after we've told them everything we know? Seren turned from the window. That depends on what we want to happen. What do you want? She thought about Garrett Thorne, standing on that rooftop, offering a debt he could never repay. About Knox Everhart, handing her a lifeline without asking for anything in return. About Rowan Ashford, broken by betrayal but still reaching for redemption. About all the people who had shown her that connection wasn't weakness. That trust wasn't surrender. That being part of something larger than yourself could be strength instead of vulnerability. I want to finish this, she said finally. The consortium, the long game, whatever they're planning. I want to burn it all down. And then, she paused, then I want to stop being dead. I want to exist again. Really exist. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, as a person. Marcus smiled. It was a weary expression, but genuine. That might be the most human thing I've ever heard you say. Don't get used to it. But she was smiling too, just slightly, just enough. The extraction team arrived 6 hours later. 3 helicopters, 24 operators, enough firepower to fight a small war. Garrett Thorne stepped off the lead helicopter, his eyes scanning the safe house until they found Seren standing in the doorway. "You're alive," he said. "Disappointed? Relieved." He crossed the distance between them. "Admiral Crane sends his regards. Also his personal assurance that whatever resources you need to finish this operation, you'll have them." "I'll need a lot. Then you'll get a lot." He looked past her to where Marcus was being loaded onto a stretcher. "That's Wraith 3? Marcus Cole. He has intelligence on the consortium's full operation, everything they've planned, everything they're preparing." Garrett's expression hardened. "Then we should get him somewhere secure, somewhere we can debrief him properly." Agreed. Seren started toward the helicopter, but Garrett's hand on her arm stopped her. "Seren," she turned. "When this is over, when the consortium is destroyed and the long game is finished," he searched for the right words, "there's a place for you at the command, if you want it. Real position, real identity, real life." She studied his face for a long moment. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you saved 11 lives. I know you walked through hell without flinching. I know you came back when you could have disappeared forever." He released her arm. "That's enough for me. That's enough for anyone." She said nothing, but she didn't walk away either. After a moment, she nodded once. Then she turned and boarded the helicopter. Behind her, the Greek sun continued to rise, burning away the shadows. The flight back to the United States took 18 hours. Seren spent most of it staring out the window, watching continents slide by beneath the clouds. Rowan was waiting when they landed. She looked nervous, uncertain, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump. "The data from your intercept device," she said as Seren stepped off the plane. "Knox decoded it, the consortium's communications, their operational plans, everything. And it's worse than we thought. They have assets in 12 countries, government officials, military officers, intelligence operatives, a network that's taken decades to build." Rowan swallowed hard. "But we can stop them. Now that we know who they are, now that we know what they're planning, we can stop them." Seren looked at the people gathered around the landing strip. Garrett and his team, Knox and his analysts, Admiral Crane, standing at attention, his face grave but determined. An army, ready to fight. "Yes," she said finally. "We can." She started walking toward the assembled group, toward the future that was waiting, toward the light.